Minutes past 8 here on the Radio Wammo Breakfast.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Russell Norman.
Yeah, let's talk politics with Russell Norman, our first catch-up for 2010. Hello to you, Russell.
Happy New Year, Wammo.
Happy New Year to you indeed as well. Wellington City you're in today, but you're embarking on what's called the Dirty Rivers Rafting Tour.
Yeah.
Which sounds kind of dangerous, Russell.
Yeah, we thought instead of going to all the really clean rivers, we'd actually go to the dirty ones and do a bit of rafting and kayaking on those, just to draw attention to what's going on.
So, have you been rafting so far?
We just launched it yesterday, just on the Hutt River in Wellington. The Hutt River's got major problems last week. There was health warnings put out for people to avoid the Hutt River.
Right.
So we thought we'd start there, and then we're going to travel around.
And what do you? I mean, is it a raft, like a traditional raft, where you got logs and you thatch them together?
No, not quite like that. So it's a combination of rafts and kayaks. So yeah, it's pretty standard watercraft. It's just that we're taking them to dirty places.
Right. Sounds like Deliverance to me.
Yeah, well,
it could get a bit dodgy along the way. But in all seriousness, I mean, if you're doing the dirtiest rivers, it's going to be a bit of a health hazard.
Yeah, there are some health hazards with dirty rivers. I mean, there's that Nelson holiday camp at the moment, isn't there, where they've all become sick and started to try vomiting and diarrhea because they were taking the water from a dirty stream which had E. coli in it. So you do need to be a bit careful with rivers. It's true, and I'll get my vaccinations, make sure they're up to date.
Yeah. So okay. So the Hutt River, and where are you headed next?
Well, next is the Waiho, which is up in the Hauraki Plains. Just drains into the Firth of Thames, and it starts off in quite good shape in the Kaimai. But then as it goes down through that agricultural land, it gets increasingly polluted until it deposits a huge nutrient and sediment load into the Firth of Thames. And the Firth of Thames, quite interestingly, it's probably going to be our first dead zone. You know, these dead zones that develop, you've heard about them overseas, where heaps of nutrient gets pumped out by river systems, and eventually you get these algal blooms, and then all the oxygen gets taken by the algae at night, and you get a collapse in all the ecosystems. So probably the first place that's going to happen in New Zealand will be the Firth of Thames, with the Piako and the Waiho pumping so much nutrient and sediment into that place. And so there's predictions for that area. So that's one of the places we want to draw attention to.
So, I mean, your expectations are pretty low, for the quality of these rivers. Do you think you're going to be surprised at all?
Well, we've done a lot of work on these rivers over the years, so I doubt it. Though, in spite of how toxic a lot of them are, ecology is pretty amazing, and so you do find some things living in them to manage to survive in them. But, like the Hutt River used to be full of eels. I mean, I was down there yesterday talking to old-timers from the Hutt, and, they used to pull out lots of big eels, and of course they don't anymore. So, a lot of our eels and native fish have disappeared from a lot of these catchments.
And it's mainly this time of the year that people from the cities get to discover exactly what's happening in these rivers, because they're out on holiday and they're looking for their favourite waterhole to swim in. That's
right. I mean, people often don't realise what bad shape they're in until the summer, and they go out there and they go to swim in them, and then there's warnings about swimming in rivers all over the country. There's actually warnings currently in place about swimming around beaches as well, because after heavy rain events, all the crap gets washed down the rivers, so you get this huge mass of fecal coliforms coming out into the kind of coastal environment. And so, like some of the beaches in the Hawke's Bay, for example, you shouldn't swim in them 3 days after a heavy rain event, because they'll be so full of fecal coliforms.
Yeah. And so, where does the tour wrap up?
Well, we'll probably wrap up down in the Southland in Matoda, which, it's the big river that runs south through Southland and through Gore, Bill English's electorate. And Matoda's heavily polluted by dairy intensification. Southland's had massive dairy intensification over the last decade. And so the kind of nutrient algal loads and E. coli loads in that river have increased dramatically.
Do you have an update on the Mackenzie country, the factory farm submissions about the dairy farm that was going to go in there?
Yeah, so there's the proposals. Pardon me. There's proposals for. I think there's applications for about 120 or 130 water takes for different kinds of agricultural use, and then there's these three big ones which have got a lot of attention because of the kind of factory farming dimension for about 18,000 cows. And currently we're putting pressure on the government to call it in. In fact, you can go to our website and send an e-card to the Minister for the Environment, because one of the grounds for a call-in, which is where central government takes over the resource consent process from the regional government, one of the grounds for a call-in is public interest in it. So it's quite important we get quite a lot of public pressure on it. So the local member down there, Jackie Dean, who's been very, very unpopular with the locals because she's been so inadequate on these issues, she's finally supported a call-in. The Minister of Agriculture has come out and said he doesn't support these cubicle farms or factory farms. And so the pressure is building on the government to call it in. The Prime Minister, of course, has come out and said that he's concerned about New Zealand's international reputation. I think that pressure's building on that. But, of course, it's much bigger than just the factory farms. It's the whole impact on the water quality down there. If you're a salmon farmer down there, and there's 3 salmon farms down there, and there's going to be more if we protect the water quality, which, produce a lot of money and a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
They rely on the clear water. So if we get water pollution, it will destroy the salmon industry. And the tourist industry, of course, which is the biggest industry down there, and a $14 billion export industry, it totally relies on clean and green, and they're deeply worried about all these dairy conversions.
And so perhaps in this we're relying on other businesses to step up and fight this for the sake of their own businesses. We
are. There's actually a pretty broad alliance now. I mean, because, there's not only the kind of tourist industry and salmon industry, but there's also all the old-time farmers down there. Because I spent 3 days down there last week and talked to lots of people, and people are very, very unhappy about it. Because if you can imagine, if you live in somewhere like Twizel and you're basically being surrounded by pivot irrigators who are spraying effluent, that is cow shit from dairy sheds, all day, every day, literally, and there's lots of wind through there. It's a big windy area. And so the effluent droplets inevitably get carried through the township because they're going to be surrounded. They've already got huge dairy conversions, and it's going to get worse. So a lot of people up there are really worried about it.
Hey, Russell, talking about our international reputation, you were recently attacking the government for giving $45 million, a bit of a discount to the makers of Avatar. Why was that?
Well, I was simply making the point that, it's fine to encourage, industry here, like high-tech industries like 3D animation and so forth. I mean, I think it's great, and I actually really loved Avatar. But I think there should be a cap on how much money we give to 20th Century Fox and big corporations. And so, currently the way the law is written is that it's an open checkbook. And so I just think there needs to be some limit on corporate welfare.
Do you know what that limit should be? Or?
Well, no, I don't. But it probably should be less than $45 million, which seems like a hell of a lot of money to give an incredibly profitable corporation, Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation.
Probably a drop in the bucket for the budget of that film, though.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it is. I think the budget was $300 million or something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a significant part of it. But, if every country in the world offers open-ended checkbooks to every corporation on the basis that come and set yourself up here rather than somewhere else, it's just a race to the bottom of giving away taxpayer money. So we need to say, what's the cap on this? How much? We can't just have an open checkbook about it.
Yeah. And we also need to accurately measure the benefits to the New Zealand economy and the New Zealand people.
Well, and there are significant benefits, and so that's why I don't oppose the scheme in toto. I just think there should be a cap on how much we spend. I mean, some of these films have big budgets. We could end up spending hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hey, Russell Norman, good luck on the dirty rafting river tour. We'll catch up with you perhaps next week in the middle of that tour.
All right.
Thanks
very much.
Cheers. That is co-leader of the Greens